Welcome to the VACo County Pulse legislative series. This legislative series of the Pulse is focused on the issues that impact Virginia counties. This series is developed by the Virginia Association of Counties and shares with our viewers the pulse of Virginia county governments. I'm Dean Lynch, VACo Executive Director, and today I'm excited to welcome Katie Boyle, VACo's Director of Government Affairs, for our second episode in the series. Katie is going to be providing an update on cigarette taxation. As VACo members are well aware, the authority for all counties to impose cigarette taxes is something that VACo had long advocated for, and that authority was finally granted in 2020. But that isn't the last word on this issue. Today, we'll talk more about where we stand legislatively, as well as how our members are choosing to use this new authority. Katie, welcome to the County Pulse.
Well, thanks so much, Dean. I'm excited to be here.
Katie, where do we stand on the legislative front with cigarette taxation in the counties?
Well, great. Thank you. So I'm going to have to kind of back us up a little bit and give a little bit of backstory. So as you mentioned, this is something that counties had long sought, and finally we were able to secure this authority in 2020 in an omnibus bill that granted additional taxing authority for counties to be more akin to what cities and towns already exercise. And so, of course, want to give big thanks to our patrons for getting this bill across the finish line. Senator Hanger, Senator Favola, House Finance Chairwoman Watts, Delegate Kilgore. This was a very heavy lift, and they really worked hard to make this happen. And so because it was such a challenging piece of legislation, and as bills work their way through the process, they require some compromises to get through. And so one of those was a cap on the rate that counties can charge. So the rate is capped at the equivalent of 40 cents for a 20 cigarette pack of cigarettes. And the other was a 1-year delay on the effective date of the authority. So counties can't begin implementing this until July 1st, 2021, even though this bill passed in 2020. And so one of the other requirements to kind of get this bill through was that in the intervening year, the Department of Taxation was directed to have a work group get together to talk about ways to streamline the collection process. And so, as you know, from many years of working on this issue, typically the way that cigarette taxes are enforced is through the application of tax stamps that document that the tax has been paid. And so, in most cases, the wholesalers are responsible for obtaining those stamps from the taxing jurisdiction and then making sure that the correct stamp is placed on packs going to retailers in different jurisdictions. And so that's a process that, admittedly has some logistical difficulties, especially for wholesalers that sell to retailers in a whole bunch of different localities. Plus, stamps as a physical object can be kind of challenging, especially when you have more than one of them and they get stuck to each other and they tear or they peel off, et cetera. And so wholesalers have historically wanted to reduce the number of jurisdictions that have their own individual tax stamps. And the model that they've traditionally pointed to is the Northern Virginia Cigarette Tax Board. And so that began in 1970. It serves 19 jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. And they have a consolidated state and regional stamp. So there's one stamp to keep track of rather than 19. So the work group was tasked with looking at a couple of things, one of which was having the State Department of Taxation just handle collecting cigarette taxes for counties. And so, there was not a whole lot of appetite in the work group for that. I think they would have to really staff up significantly in order to enforce that. There was a lot of discussion about regional models versus counties implementing on their own. And so our perspective was, that we recognize that there are some advantages to regional models. It's worked very well in Northern Virginia, but we could not support requiring counties to participate in regional approaches because, that just may not make sense everywhere. There's geography at play and there's a lot of other issues. So during the 2021 session that just wrapped up, a bill that was introduced that would have required counties to be part of a regional board in order to impose cigarette taxes. And so after a lot of debate, objections raised by VACo and our members, that bill ended up being walked back to instead state a preference for regional administration and to direct another work group for the Department of Taxation to get together to look at improving the process, as well as how counties could be assisted in forming new regional boards. And so I've been in touch with the department, and I expect that they'll get this work group together, sometime fairly soon to kind of have another bite at this issue.
Katie, thanks for that update there. I know this issue, while it was passed in 2020, we've continued to work on it all year up until up until July 1. Hopefully, that some counties will be able to implement this new authority. Uh, from your experience and from your discussion with counties, how are counties going to be implementing the authority?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we've been trying to kind of keep tabs. So it's a fluid situation. So we'll sort of tell you what I know as of now, and as expected. I mean, it varies what counties are doing, and I would say that's not a surprise. I mean, we would always maintained in our advocacy for the taxing authority bill that counties have really complex governing responsibilities and they should have taxing authority that's on par with their city counterparts. But also, local elected officials would be in the best position to make decisions about raising revenues that make the most sense for their communities. And so, that cigarette tax might make sense in some jurisdictions and maybe not in others. So we knew that it wouldn't necessarily be a solution for everybody. Also not necessarily surprised that not every county is moving forward right away, even if they are interested in implementing it. Because prior to 2020, only two counties had this authority, Fairfax County and Arlington County. So, this is a new process that's going to have to be rolled out in counties, and it is somewhat complex. So, it's a little bit of a fluid situation. Some counties had this revenue source on the table as part of their budget discussions this year and opted not to proceed. So, it's an evolving situation. But what we know as of today, there are a few counties that have formally moved forward, and they're going to implement the tax as of July 1st. So Amherst County was one of the first to move forward on that. And we also know that Clark and King George and Pulaski have adopted ordinances, and they're moving forward. There are a couple of other counties that are considering a July 1st start date as part of their fiscal 2022 budget process. And so that's in the works. They may be having some public hearings and that sort of thing. We've also got a couple of counties that have indicated that they're preparing to implement, but at a later date, because they maybe need some more time to work with their wholesaler and retailer community to prepare or to design and get the tax stamps ordered and things like that. So, for example, York County has adopted an ordinance and they're moving forward, but not until November 1st, 2021. And there are a couple of other counties that are in the same boat there. We've also got some counties that are planning to join the Northern Virginia Cigarette Tax Board. For example, some of the counties where that board is already collecting on behalf of their towns. We have some counties that aren't planning to impose at all at this point. And then we also have several regional boards in various stages of development, which is exciting. The Mount Rogers area in Southwest Virginia has formed a board, and 4 counties that I know of thus far have joined. And there are some cities and towns that are in the process of deciding on whether they want to participate or not. So that's a really robust effort happening there. That's exciting. There's also a regional board being established in the eastern part of the state with several counties on the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula, and also several of their towns. And then I'm aware that there's some discussions happening kind of in various stages of formality in several other regions. So, there's some exciting work happening with counties cooperating with their neighbors. But like I said, there's a lot of variation out there in how counties are choosing to move forward.
Katie, what are the pros and cons of administering on one's own or regionally?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think this is something that counties are all kind of weighing, the ones that are deciding about moving forward. So, I mean, I think I would say at the outset that, there's some administrative and enforcement costs for really any form of raising revenue, and certainly for cigarette taxes, whether a county's implementing on its own or as part of a region. The advantage of a regional body is that it would allow for some of those administrative costs to be shared, spread out among those jurisdictions. So, for example, the Northern Virginia board, they split their costs based on how many packs are sold in each of its member jurisdictions. So it's kind of accounting for the workload that's generated in each of their localities. And of course, they're spreading the revenues out also based on your tax rate and what's sold and, you know, what's owed to you in your individual jurisdiction, but you're also kind of spreading the costs around. You know, having one stamp for a state and regional, you know, consolidated stamp does streamline some work, you know, for your business community. I think there are some enforcement advantages there because you don't have issues with, you know, multiple stamps getting gummed up in the machine or that kind of thing, that, you know, when two stamps are applied. I guess, you know, some of the drawbacks would be that, you know, there is some extra effort involved in standing up a regional board. Likely some upfront costs, you know, depending on how you structure it. Some counties have been working through their planning district commissions to set these regional boards up. And so, you know, that might save you some costs there if you've already got kind of existing office space and that kind of thing. Otherwise, you may need to rent space, you know, and incur some of those associated costs. So, I mean, I think essentially counties will need to weigh, you know, the amount of revenue that they expect to generate from the tax and the additional enforcement capability that a regional board would provide you against any additional cost for setting up that board. And of course, you also want to kind of do that cost benefit analysis for your in-house administration and enforcement costs also.
Katie, how is VACo assisting members in working through the implementation of the cigarette tax?
Well, thank you. I mean, this has been somewhat of an ongoing project for us as counties sort of move closer to going live with implementation. So last summer, after the bill passed and the work group started to meet, we put some periodic updates in the newsletter to keep members informed. We did some surveying of county administrators over the course of the summer just to kind of get a sense of what our members' preferences were on some of the issues being discussed. You know, would counties like for the state to handle this on their behalf? Would they like to have regional boards? Do they want to go it on their own? I mean, we got a fair amount of variety in those responses as well. So as more jurisdictions started thinking about implementation, and as that work group wrapped up late summer, early fall, we had a webinar last fall with an opportunity to try to offer some peer learning and some Q&A. So want to thank York County. A lot of counties had been asking for some help in generating revenue estimates, and York County shared the model that they put together to project their revenues, which was really helpful. We had the Northern Virginia Cigarette Tax Board's administrator there to kind of talk about how her board operates, and she subsequently shared their agreement and a sample ordinance. So that was very helpful. And then this spring, once we were sort of winding down the General Assembly, we had a webinar about tax stamping with our premier partner, SICPA MeyerCord Revenue, which is the vendor for the state and the Northern Virginia board, and also a lot of the cities and towns that already have cigarette tax stamps. And so that webinar provided an overview of the cigarette tax stamping process, which is its own interesting world. And then we followed that up with a couple of live Q&A sessions to give people an opportunity to ask questions. And then we recorded those sessions as well. And so all those materials that I mentioned, plus some of the ordinances that have been adopted thus far by member counties are all posted on our online toolkit. And so we can make that address available, but it's just a page on our website. Definitely a work in progress, and you know, we're adding materials as things are developed and as the process moves along. But the idea was to just have like a hub where everything could be in one place and people could find all the resources that we've got to share on one page. We've also been trying to, you know, field questions as they come in. We've been connecting, if counties are interested in a regional model, we've been connecting them with the Northern Virginia board. Really want to thank their staff and their leadership. They've been really generous with their time and their expertise in advising counties, answering questions about regional models, but also about sort of cigarette tax enforcement more broadly. They have so much experience there. Also been in touch with the Wholesalers Association. I've posed a couple of questions that have come to us, to those folks. They have a lot of experience, of course, in administering the Northern Virginia boards tax, the cities and towns that have the authority already. So I guess, our message to our members who are watching this is, please don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, this is new for most counties, but it's not new to the state of Virginia. So there are resources that are available, and we're very willing to do what we can to connect you with those resources.
Katie, thank you for giving us this legislative update on cigarette taxes and cigarette taxation authority. We want to encourage those to check out our series next week, when we'll have another legislative issue. But thank you for being with us on the VACo County Pulse.
Thank you.